Hello everyone and welcome back to the Common Sense Crypto channel. As with you always, this is Rich doing another video today on XRP. So I hope you're all having a wonderful day today wherever you are in this great world. We're gonna talk about XRP. And I gotta start with this. There's a lot of price predictions dropping now. This comes from Michael Branch. Onyx predicted that XRP price could reach $20 while noting that 18 XRP ETF filings have now been submitted to the US SEC. Everybody's focused on those ETFs now because there's a good chance that they are going to go live very soon. So he's predicting $20. Greg Crypto is predicting $33 and $70, somewhere in between there. Why don't they just say, I'm predicting between $20 and $100, and let's see where we come in at. But he's referring to the wave pattern on the charts. And a lot of people think that's possible because of the 2017-2018 run. And now it's even more likely with the Ripple vs. SEC case finally done and over with. The next big thing that's going to happen in this cycle, I'm telling you now, is regulations. And then shortly after that, it will be ISO 222. Institutional investors surveyed by Coinbase and EY Parthenon were more likely to own XRP than Solana in January, according to a report published by the firms on Tuesday. Institutions are more likely to invest into XRP over Solana. And now, again, because the case is over, it's going to give them even more enthusiasm to push towards XRP. Everything we ever wanted to happen for this cryptocurrency is about to happen. So far, XRP holders, XRP investors have been proven right time and time again. We were right about the Ripple vs. SEC case. We were right about Ripple laying rails all around the globe during the Ripple vs. SEC case. Soon, we're going to be right about the flip of the switch moment. We're also going to be right about the rise of the Phoenix and the new financial system. This comes from the XRP guy. Breaking. We are now at phase 6 of XRP's rise to dominance. 1 was RLUSD is released. 2, Trump's inauguration. 3, Gary gone at the SEC. 4, the XRP strategic reserve. But we did get a stockpile instead. Ripple case is now over. Alt season has yet to begin. Ripple names big bank partnership. I believe that's going to come sooner than later. XRP ETF approval pending. Hold. Do not sell. And I agree with that. Anybody selling now is going to be filled with regret in the coming weeks. Everything, and I mean everything, going forward is very bullish for XRP. Ripple IPO isn't a huge priority because they are cashed up. This comes from Subjective Views. Take a listen to Brad here talking about an IPO.
Is an IPO, frankly, in your future now? We talk so much about the potential for the XRP token to be wrapped in an ETF. That is a method of listing. Right. So is listing possible now for you for Ripple?
Well, it's certainly something that is possible. The United States SEC under Gensler was so hostile to this industry. I mean, ironically, they approved the S1 from Coinbase and then sued them for doing the things they said they were doing. So this SEC, fortunately, is going to be, I think, very constructive and positive for this industry. So I think that's available, and I think the company's at a stage where we could consider that. That being said, it isn't a huge priority. I think most companies are going public. Raising capital is something that is high on their radar. We have been in a very fortunate position to be able to grow the business organically. We're also, frankly, more proactive in looking at acquisitions. This is an industry that finally is going to be able to thrive in the United States, the largest economy in the world. And I think the industry is still underestimating the shift from the headwinds to the tailwinds. That's going to make a bigger difference than people think. And finally, the U.S. market is really unlocked.
So it sounds like what you're saying.
So the U.S. market is now unlocked, and Brad's looking at more acquisitions this year. And he's not ruling out an IPO yet. So are we going to see an IPO? I don't think it's going to happen in 2025. I will be shocked if it happens sometime this year. Those acquisitions, though, I think they're going to be a very big deal because Brad doesn't just go out there and look for companies that aren't going to push Ripple or XRP ahead. He's looking down the road. And that's what I like about Brad as the CEO at Ripple. He always has a way to see the next big thing before it happens. And we did get some big announcements. BitNominal set to launch first ever regulated XRP futures in the US today. That's going to be big. I want to see if value comes from that. And LMAX digital clients can now access Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin. This expansion of our institutional trading infrastructure to include RLUSD continues to highlight our commitment to providing institutions with efficient and transparent market access to the most liquid assets. And this is coming out of London. And they're also talking about bridging the gap between TradFi and DeFi. And I like the idea of that as well. And they've also supported XRP trading since back in 2018. Like I said, big things are going to start happening now. The biggest players in the game are going to start making announcements now. What was keeping a lot of them held off when it comes to XRP is the fact that the Rippleverse SEC case wasn't done and over with yet. Now that it is, big things are coming. This comes from Digital Assets Daily. Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse is confident XRP will be added to the White House digital asset stockpile and expects to see an XRP ETF this year. Take a listen to what Brad says about the stockpile.
Why do you think XRP wasn't specifically named in the executive order for the digital asset stockpile?
Well, so XRP was named by the president on Truth Social. He posted something saying that there should be other tokens, that there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve and then a crypto stockpile that would include things like XRP.
But days later, the executive order didn't include it. Why was that?
I don't know what specifically was in the executive order. My understanding is there's going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve. There'll be a crypto stockpile representing other cryptos. And I would expect that will include XRP. Look, at the end of the day, I think the stark contrast is in the Biden administration, we couldn't get a meeting with people at the White House. Now we're welcomed into the White House. And that's just a massive change. I think we want this industry to thrive in the United States. We don't want to push it offshore where you have fewer regulations.
I think the reason I keep pushing you, too, is because I think now it's widely accepted that this is a pro-crypto administration. But the details, that is what's causing an overhang, the uncertainty of the details. So to the extent you have confidence, right, about XRP being in that stockpile or otherwise getting more support for an ETF, for example, where does that confidence come from and what kind of timeline do you see it happening on?
So I have immense confidence on the ETF. I think there's 11 different filings pending with the SEC to launch ETFs from everybody from Bitwise to Franklin Templeton and a whole bunch of people in between. I think those will be live in the second half of this year. We have seen even outside the United States, you have live ETPs. And at a time when a lot of outflows are exiting some of the crypto ETFs, you're seeing inflows into XRP. And I think that's because you had this false negative pressure from the SEC, this kind of exogenous hand holding things down that's now being released. And that's great for the market. That's great for builders within the XRP ecosystem globally.
One more on the stockpile.
Yeah.
How much XRP would be in it? Where does it come from?
Well, my understanding of what I read about I think there are some questions, and that the devil may be in the details as Treasury implements some of this.
Absolutely in the details.
But my understanding is that the stockpile will be represented by seized other cryptos other than Bitcoin that then will be in that stockpile. So to the extent that various law enforcement agencies have seized cryptos, which would include XRP, that those would go into the stockpile in addition to the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve.
So how does the U.S. government get the XRP? Is it going to come from the Ripple versus SEC settlement? Or how is that going to happen? Because Brad wasn't fully clear on that. I don't think they ever seized any XRP. I might be wrong about that. And if you know something I don't know, definitely put it in the comments section down below. But Brad is very confident about the XRP ETFs. He said second half of this year. I honestly think it's going to happen before we even get to summer. I think it's going to happen sooner than we think. And I think what it's going to take is this. I think BlackRock will enter the game and say that they're going to file for an XRP ETF. Then they will push the SEC to get that approved as quick as they can. Look at what they did with the Bitcoin ETF. Once BlackRock was on board, right away, the Bitcoin ETF started going live. And that was under Gary Gensler. And I think it's going to be a lot easier under Atkins. But Brad is 100% right. A year ago, you would have never seen anyone from this space at the White House. It wouldn't even have been talked about. Now they're welcomed at the White House. And when it comes to that stockpile, I think Brad might be holding some things back. I'm sure he knows a lot more than what we know, how XRP is going to be utilized in the United States. We just got to wait and see where this goes from here. And then this also happened. First off, you have Jerome Powell talking about tariffs causing inflation. Take a listen. And I want to remind you that those tariffs didn't even begin yet.
How much of the higher inflation forecast for this year is due to tariffs? And since the policy path remains the same, are you effectively reading this as a one-time price level shock?
Okay, so how much of it is tariff? So let me say that it is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but
he created the inflation that they are fighting. That he's the blame for all of the inflation. There's always an unconditional possibility of a recession. Here comes the recession talk as well.
There's always an unconditional possibility of a recession. It might be broadly in the range of 1 in 4 at any time. If you look back through the years, there could be within 12 months a 1 in 4 chance of a recession. So the question is whether this current situation, those possibilities are elevated. I will say this. We don't make such a forecast. If you look at outside forecasts, forecasters have generally raised, a number of them have raised their possibility of a recession somewhat. But
so are we going to go into a recession or not? And like I said, there's going to be a period of hard times as we transition into the golden age. A gold-backed digital currency, a gold-backed digital dollar is absolutely coming. And then he kept interest rates unchanged and reaffirms long-term inflation goals. Like I said, these inflation numbers are made-up numbers. He caused the inflation that we're fighting right now, and the American people are suffering because of it. And I do believe inflation will start to come down after a period of hardship first. I see people calling for hyperinflation later this year. But we already know what's going to happen as crypto holders. We know that first there's going to be a crisis and then the rise of the phoenix. We've talked about it multiple times in the past. When is it going to happen? Nobody really knows yet. But I'm still waiting to see where XRP goes from here. Now that we have a lot of recovery to do on the price of XRP. And is that recovery going to be fast? Is it going to be gradual upward movement? Maybe a spike here or there? We really don't know yet because it just ended. So many people are hyping this up and they're saying within the next 48 hours, expect the price to go to double digits. I don't see that happening. Like I said, we were tied up in this case for years. It's going to take weeks to recover from that in the price of XRP. That's my honest opinion on it. And until it happens, stay patient, stay positive, and let's get rich together. With that said, I'm going to wrap up this video. I want to thank you all for watching. I appreciate all of you. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great night.